recognizing the size of this country and the scale of its problems, also how young the mental health challenge is in the country, we realized very early on that at Amaha, we wanted to do something that is at scale, that is reaching out to a large number of people. The path to wholeness is really about accepting one's brokenness, about accepting all parts of oneself, and then being able to make peace with that, and then also build on that, right? And I really believe that, whether it's finding your thrive or finding a sense of purpose, the ability to do something for others has to come from really being able to piece yourself together. Funding is a massive challenge in this space. So if you look at the government funding, from the healthcare budget, 0.6% goes towards mental health today. So public funding, philanthropic funding, all of that needs to go up. I believe that hearing from experts by experience is the biggest game changer in any space, right? And particularly in mental health. So I think any platforms for building awareness by speaking about one's own stories, it's always the case that when you share, others will share too. It's about normalizing and creating the permission to hold space for these narratives.
Hi, welcome to the Mohua show. My name is Mohua Chinappa and I am an author, entrepreneur and ex-housewife. This podcast is about everything from business to technology to arts to lifestyle, but done and spoken ईमानदारी से.
Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Neha Kirpal, a social entrepreneur who has significantly impacted both the creative arts and mental health sectors. In 2008, she established India's premier international art fair, which you're going to hear a little bit from her, which she managed successfully for over a decade before divesting her stake. In 2019, Neha co-founded Amaha with Dr. Amit Malik, a mental health organization that provides accessible and high quality treatment, care, and support in over 15 languages, which I think is amazing, Neha, because there are so many people like my mother who would prefer to talk in Hindi or in Bangla. This is amazing. So we're not done yet. Neha is also the co-founder of India Mental Health Alliance, IMHA, a not-for-profit initiative set out to build mental health capacities. Neha's work is driven by her passion and commitment stemming from her own family struggle with schizophrenia. Neha is an Aspen Fellow, an Eisenhower Fellow, and part of the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders community. She has received several awards, including the President of India's prestigious Nari Shakti Award. And I can't be more honored to have Neha today here with me. And the first question that Neha come to me, in our conversation is that, can you start by telling us about your journey from raising awareness about mental health to driving tangible impact through Amaha and IMHA?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here and for making this conversation happen. So I think for me, and for many of us, we are personally motivated to see some change in the mental health narratives, in the way people are able to own their stories, and in the impact that we can have. So very early on, I realized that actually there is such a big gap in India when it comes to accessing quality mental health. There are so many stigmas and barriers to easy access to care, and even then you don't know where to get help and how to get help. And recognizing the size of this country and the scale of its problems, also how young the mental health challenge is in the country, we realized very early on that at Amaha we wanted to do something that is at scale, that is reaching out to a large number of people. And so to be able to build teams, to build infrastructure, to be able to raise funding, to be able to work in a way that we are really able to make mental health care as accessible as possible to the largest sort of section of people. Today, we reach 600 cities across India. As you mentioned, we do 15 languages. We have an in-house clinical team of about 160 psychiatrists and therapists. And they are all working on our digital platform, which has over 5 million lives that it has touched. So in that way, I think the attempt really is to, from Amaha's perspective, to be able to provide quality services and provide them at scale to people wherever they might be for the whole range of mental health conditions. And so a few years ago, we came together with Children First, which is a child and adolescent mental health organization. So now we can support the entire family's care under one sort of umbrella. And in addition to that, we realized that training of mental health professionals, training of community first responders is key, because there are just not enough professionals to provide quality service. And so we, Children First and Amaha came together with Ashish and Vasvi Bharatram earlier this year, and we set up the India Mental Health Alliance to be able to build capacity, to be able to expand the nature of care, and be able to build care models together with existing organizations. So, in the shape of an alliance, we come together with mental health organizations from across the country, and we hope to be able to build competency frameworks, to be able to build community models championed by people who are living mental health realities. And so many of us out there who are often unseen and unheard. So for us to be able to really find our way in influencing how programs are designed and how quality care is given in the country.
So, Neha, the next question that comes to me is that what motivated you to shift your focus from the creative sector to the marginalized sector of mental health? I mean, the shift is humongous, right? From the world of arts to getting down to mental health. What was it that got you going in this?
I mean, I think for me, it's been like homecoming. Mental health and mental illness has been a large defining theme of my life and of my early childhood years. We suffered a lot as a family. My mother had schizophrenia from a very early age. I saw a lot of difficulties in the family, a lot of all the things that come with schizophrenia. And in the 80s, when people didn't understand what it was, and so my younger brother and I really sort of grew up in the shadow, so to say, of this mental illness, and trying to figure out how to navigate social life, school life, and community life around that. I think the arts was my time to be able to have a safe way of reflecting and healing, and being able to channelize energy in a sort of a creative context. But looking at the themes of mental health, it was always a calling for me. And so a few years into running the art fair, I realized that I was actually ready and to be in a place where I could try and bring some of that effort into building mental health care in the country. And so I decided to move on from the India Art Fair. So that was 2008 to 2018. And it felt like a very natural, I know in the eyes of the world it can feel like a big shift, but for those of us whose lives have been primarily colored with mental health challenges, for me to be able to work in this space has been extremely gratifying and fulfilling. And it's a sort of a more personal mission of purpose. And so in that sense, I was able to easily transition. I did spend about a year after the art fair going around the world. I met over 250 organizations working in the mental health space to really understand how they are actually operating, what are the services that are being built, how do you bring quality, how do you ensure that the voice of the lived experience and that wisdom is captured in building programs. And with that came to my business partner Amit, who's a psychiatrist from the UK, and we started building on the dream of Amaha to make mental health care affordable, accessible, and find appropriate care for everyone. So literally the name Amaha comes from, the three A's come from that, and of course mental health. And we wanted a name that is easily ownable, easily relatable, and can belong to anyone across the country.
Amazing, Neha. I mean, hats off to people like you who are really thinking about all these things, because I personally feel that, especially with my mother who's older now, and she would prefer to talk like I spoke to you in the beginning in Bangla or in Hindi. She would best express herself. She shies away from going and talking to someone in English. So let's just talk a little bit about the challenges you faced in scaling impact and how did you overcome them? It isn't easy the minute it's impact, right? So how did you go ahead, Neha?
I think the first thing to recognize is all the challenges that people actually go through as they are trying to find help, right? And we know that in a country like India, 200 million people with diagnosed mental health conditions, these are pre COVID numbers. We know that after COVID, there was a 35% increase. So, literally, if mental illness is a 1 in 4 problem as per WHO, then it's there in every home. And we know that things like suicide are the second largest cause of death in the 15 to 25 range. And so recognizing that, you know that people have many barriers to accessing quality care. Affordability is a factor, where to find the right kind of help. How do you trust? How do you even know whether to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist? How do you know whether group work will help you, or couples counseling will help, or individual work will help? There are today many therapeutic modalities, right? There's body work, somatic work, eye movement, talk therapy, narrative therapies. So many different ways of navigating these mental health challenges. And also because this is a biopsychosocial set of factors that creates this, right? Our genetics, our early childhood influences, the adverse traumas we may have. So many factors that input the creation of our mental health, and also the disruption of it. So we have to have a very rounded approach when we think of solving for it as well, right? If we have to truly support people and be there, as Amaha says, your mental health partner. So if we have to truly partner with people in this journey, it's about understanding all the pain points and the steps that they need to go through in that journey of trying to seek the right care, working through treatment, working through rehabilitation, and then integrating back into their lives, their workplaces, their communities, and continuing to deal with mental health challenges. See, often these are lifelong challenges. Often they are, they get worse and progress over time if left untreated. And so, recognizing that, we wanted to build something that is holistic, where we can essentially provide a sort of a blanket for people and support them wherever they might be on their journey. And so, for a range of mental health conditions, ranging from depressive and anxiety disorders to bipolar, psychosis, addictive disorders, eating disorders, the idea is to work across the board and help the whole family. And for this, we have online touch points through the app. People can, we have a chat bot, people can leave their queries. We have about 500 self help programs that are there on our platform that people can access and get support anytime. And of course, they can access the therapy and psychiatry. And the important thing is that this all works together. So you can literally call Amaha and have a free coach call and just share your problem, and we will try and help you figure out what do you need, what kind of provider do you need, what kind of service, how do you best matchmake with, depending on your need and your personality and your language preference. Then we try and bring it together. So in this way, the hope is to be able to serve people in our centers in Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore, as well as online. And we are opening our first acute inpatient center in Bangalore later this year as well, so that we are able to support people no matter what the level of crisis and trauma. We are able to support them in their entire journey.
So, how do you measure long term outcomes in mental health care?
I mean, that's a great question. Outcomes are, I suppose, to some extent, the idea for any clinical service like ours is to try and provide the best outcomes. But we recognize that because of the complexity of these conditions and the fact that it's not one size fits all, different solutions work for different people. Some people need more medication and psychiatric intervention. Some people need more therapy. Some people might have all of that but don't have the right family support and understanding. Sometimes there's a lot of stigma. And so many factors go into shaping the outcomes. If I was to just take my own example, my mother was untreated and undiagnosed for almost 20 years. And out of that, she struggled for 10 years. She was lost to the world. And we managed to find her, and we managed to bring her back into treatment and spent 4 or 5 years in rigorous treatment. And today she is just on one antipsychotic injection once every 3 weeks, no other medication, leads a perfectly functional life, is an active grandparent in my daughter's life, and is able to perfectly sort of integrate and hold her own in society. And so that, to me, would be, on the one hand, a successful outcome. On the other hand, I ask myself, did it have to take 20, 30 years to get there? Right? What can we do to improve the recovery, to improve the earlier we intervene and get help, the better it is. On the contrast, if I was to look at challenges like, for example, that my younger brother faced, where he had a lot of adverse childhood traumas because of my mom's mental illness, and it was very difficult to navigate life in the early years. He struggled with his own mental health and several other challenges. And that was a life that we lost prematurely. My brother passed away 2 years ago. And so for me, I really look at the failure there of a mental health system, the failure of a family, the failure of our inability to get the right help at the right time, but also recognizing that sometimes these challenges are so complex that it's very hard to be able to get to whatever the right outcome might be in our own minds. And so accepting that and recognizing that, it's about families and communities really coming together, seeing the early signs of problems, being able to recognize how quickly we can start getting some form of help, and then creating a supportive environment so that each one can navigate their care journey and get to whatever best outcomes are possible. That really, I mean, unfortunately, there is no silver bullet. And as you know, we might have won a life back, but we also lost one in my own family. And so outcomes are often subjective. But the aspiration for organizations like Amaha must always be to do the absolute best you can for any family that walks in through the door. And this is the standard that we hold ourselves to. And we want to be able to keep doing the absolute best that we can, across conditions and across challenges and across age groups. And people believe that, there are providers and practitioners out there, there are organizations out there, do the best they can.
And I'm sure you will, because you are obviously so, passionately, personally involved in this whole thing. So, I mean, I don't see any reason. I just see this growing and growing further because, as you rightly said, that it is a very complex problem that is so insidious inside families that many people don't want to accept it also. And like you also said, that it's a very young, young thing that only now people are talking about mental health. So let's just talk a little bit about your work, which emphasizes the importance of addressing the intersectionality of identities and experiences in mental health care. Could you just elaborate a little more on the intersectionality?
People are multi-storied, as they say, and when we think about our identities, there are so many aspects that influence that go into the creation of one's own identity. Often, I mean, in today's times, you see a lot of young people really growing up in an era where there is an identity crisis. You almost have a projected sense in the World Wide Web and social media of a projected identity, and often people are not in harmony with themselves and not in sync with their own identities. um, the way I think about that is that, when we look at whether it's our gender, whether it's our professional identities, whether it's our place in our family, or really our relationship with ourselves, right, which is often sort of less spoken about, right?
Don't know how many of us really talk about the relationship with ourselves, and I think that is such a core.
Yeah. So to me, I mean, if I was to relate to what has been the biggest healing and reward in my own personal life, it's really been recognizing the traumas and challenges, being able to look at all the aspects that are at play, that have shaped me for who I am today, and recognizing that, the path to wholeness is really about accepting one's brokenness, about accepting all parts of oneself, and then being able to make peace with that, and then also build on that, right? And I really believe that, whether it's finding your thrive or finding a sense of purpose, the ability to do something for others has to come from really being able to piece yourself together, and not in an artificial way, but in an inside out kind of way. So, to be internally driven rather than externally stimulated, and to be able to uh, create a sense of belonging within your own skin, I feel is the core of healing and also of thriving.
Yeah, my God, this is a topic so close to my heart because, I just feel that my own relationship with myself is something that I need to address, and I've never even looked at it. And these were conversations that none of us even ever had. So, Neha, just tell me, how do factors, such as gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, intersect with mental health outcomes and access to care in your work?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it, like any healthcare or any developmental goals, mental health also is across the board, right? It impacts and is impacted by everything in our life, whether it is the cities we live in, whether it is the pollution and the climate change, whether it is our gender or our caste or our creed. All of these things have an impact. Now, most certainly, like any challenge, the more marginalized a community, the communities with less privilege, with less access, with less financial ability, struggle more, right? We see a lot of people with mental health conditions die earlier, right? Simply because even if their mental health is under control, but perhaps their physical health has not been addressed, and so they have physical health complications that go unnoticed, right? In my mother's case, we focused on our mental health so much, but she had fluid in her lungs for a long time, which has created a lot of COPD problems, which went unaddressed for a long time. So this is very common when you look at the LGBTQ community, when you look at people who are struggling on the margins, right? Of course, they will find it much harder to access quality care, whether it is their geographical ability to access it, because a lot of mental health care is concentrated in the main metros. I mean, we reach 600 cities today online, if you think about that, in 15 languages. But most of these cities don't have any mental health professionals in them. And so if you think about geographical access, if you think about language access, and at every stage there are barriers, and the other challenge is the quality, and also about what care actually means and looks like. So for a lot of people in this country, mental health issues are around superstition, right? People have often said, this person has been possessed by some demons, this person, there's jhad phook and all sorts of sort of ritualistic customs that are very dehumanizing and actually demeaning, and they break the spirit of the person, right? And so it's about getting past those superstitions, those community beliefs, recognizing that there are sometimes clinical conditions, recognizing what they are. I mean, even something like the vocabulary, words for schizophrenia and other things are not really there in other languages as much. So how do you even begin to describe the conditions and symptoms? How do you try and help people who are not English speaking necessarily understand what these illnesses are? And equally, how do you learn from them? So a lot of the work in the India Mental Health Alliance is about learning from communities to be able to create programs, to create mental health participatory models of care which are resonant with the local communities and their context, rather than taking some Western medical model and just
Yeah.
putting it in some village in Uttarakhand, right? And so that's the idea of the India Mental Health Alliance as well, that we work with organizations and with individuals of lived experience, caregiver groups across the country, recognizing what are their unique challenges. On the margins, what are people's challenges? For the LGBTQ community, looking at different kinds of segments and recognizing what their unique challenges are, and then together co-creating what is the right approach for their treatment and care and rehabilitation. Often support communities, community-based movements, caregiver support groups is the biggest sort of support system. There is a friendship bench concept that
Oh, yeah.
Dixon.
What is
There
the
are so
friendship bench? Tell me a little about that.
So there are many examples in India as well. Friendship bench is something that was started in Africa, where you had grandmothers basically just who went through a training to sit on a bench in a park and offer support. In India, you have so many models. You have arts-based models. You have, there's something amazing coming around called theater of the oppressed. So looking at art, music, dance as a way of therapeutically sort of engaging. You have so many models that are participatory in rural contexts, right? And are sort of developed together with those communities that are really that can be scaled and that can be applied in other places as well. And so the idea is to be able to learn from communities, to be able to work with people with lived experience, so that whatever is being done keeping them center, because it's really that is who we are trying to serve, right? So that is sort of the founding mission of India Mental Health Alliance as well, and of course the ethos with which Amaha does what it does every day.
So, what are the individual and systematic barriers, in mental health care that really needs to be addressed and they've not been addressed till now?
Yeah. So mental health is maybe where climate and gender and all these issues have been, decade, 2 decades earlier. And so if you look at the sort of cross sectoral impact, firstly, right, of all the, whether it's education, women and children, climate, all these have an impact on mental health and vice versa. Within the mental health space, it's a largely fragmented sort of space where there's pockets of excellence, but there's not a lot of coming together. There's not a lot of knowledge sharing and a sort of systemic platforms that can bring people together. Again, the idea of alliance building is to be able to learn from each other and work together for greater impact, right? So on the one hand, funding is a massive challenge in this space. So if you look at the government funding from the healthcare budget, 0.6% goes towards mental health today. So public funding, philanthropic funding, all of that needs to go up. And now we've got a lot of philanthropic funding in this space. Vasvi and Ashish Bharatram have come forward, Rohini Nilkhani, so many others who have come forward. But this needs to grow. CSR funding in this space needs to go.
Yeah.
The aspect is around advocacy and awareness building and policy, right? So, for example, mental health is covered by insurance. Inpatient mental health care is now covered by insurance. But how many insurance providers are providing that? And how many people actually know how to go about claiming those services, right? Then, in terms of infrastructure and service delivery. So there was a NIMHANS report saying India needs 36,000 mental health beds. At Amaha, we are setting up our first unit later this year. And we hope to set up about 20-30 units across the country over the next 5 years to really be able to reach people and get them the sort of acute care support that they need. Right. So infrastructure and service delivery is another big aspect of this. And then the other is the quality of care. And how do you expand that? And how do you expand the nature of care delivery? What are the models that exist? How can you build on that? The total number of psychologists and psychiatrists in this country are so few. And their regulation is also split, right? So the psychiatrists are under the Ministry of Health, and they follow sort of the medical model. The psychologists, some are RCI accredited. Most psychologists in the country don't have any form of accreditation. And there is not enough standardization or recognition of quality. And so how can we create the right certifications? How can we, as a country, be able to build an ecosystem of care where all these players come together and are able to sort of have a multidisciplinary approach to providing the right treatment, care, and support for lasting outcomes? That really is the key. So every aspect of the mental health ecosystem needs to be built out, so that looking back a decade from now, we can say, okay, here is an ecosystem now that has emerged, that has multiple players coming in from a clinical model, coming in from a community model, rural and urban best practice sharing, lived experience folks at the center of it all, and really making sure that we are creating convenings and opportunities for exchange and shared learning, knowledge centers being set up so that, a lot of diagnostic tests, a lot of assessments, a lot of content on different conditions can be made available to people in different languages. So it's about awareness building, it's about resource building, building services, funding those services, and then creating the right policy frameworks to be able to support all of that.
It seems mammoth, Neha, because India is a country where one would be, there is so much of barriers also, in also accepting. So it is a humongous task. Now let's just talk a little bit about your own personal experience that influenced your approach to mental health advocacy. So how has that kind of played out in your life?
As I had shared earlier, for me, the only learnings that I have are what life has taught me in the course of dealing with mental illness in my family. I have been a caregiver and sort of personally dealt with a lot of complex PTSD and ADHD and several other challenges. And you recognize the adverse effects of childhood trauma. You recognize how that impacts people in a cyclic way throughout their life. I recognize, for example, the impact mental health has on the body and on your physical health, whether it's autoimmune challenges, whether it's cancer, whether it's pain. A lot of physical challenges also emerge as a result of mental health. And you find people are hospitalized for longer, their recovery takes longer if they have mental health conditions. So for me, all of these have impacted my life. And so over time I've had to draw some strong boundaries about managing personal time and space, strong boundaries around nurturing what is fulfilling and purposeful in life, but cutting out the noise, and ensuring that there's a sort of a radar for toxicity, whether it's in people or it's in an environment, and really sort of being kinder and more compassionate to oneself. I think many of us are often more broken than we realize, and some of us are healing and grieving and going through so many things right at the same time. So it's just about being compassionate to others and also to yourself, and recognizing that we're all work in progress. And so to me, this this sense of sort of self-belief about wherever one is at, one has to accept that and build from there, has been sort of my truth, and a way of showing up in the world and also in my relationships, whether it's with my daughter or with my mother, who is a fantastic support system in my life today, as I raise my child as a single mom. So for me, it's really putting your personhood and your sense of purpose together, and finding that authentic sync and connect. That really sort of paves the path to any journey of impact, or sort of living a purposeful life. So I think that's really where my belief system comes from. And yeah, I think I'll stop there.
No, Neha, you can go on and on. These are such beautiful words to just hear you. I just realized that so many aspects there's still for me as a person, to really overcome, address. And of course, so do I go through all of these challenges myself, my relationship with food, my relationship with myself, because these are such new conversations that I'm ever having for the first time for myself. Having been born in the 70s, none of us even knew, what childhood trauma is. So let's just talk a little bit. We have to get your golden words, your advice to someone, who wants to get involved in mental health advocacy. For example, I would like to talk, about what I felt like when my son left, that emptiness syndrome. What is it? And, when I spoke about this to people, most people said, oh, come on, everybody's children goes. And my life purpose had just ended at that time. And what I did was, in turn, I started just putting all of these things inside me without addressing it now. So, if you could just share with us, what is it that, somebody wants to get involved, what is it that they can do?
Yeah, I think mental health belongs to everybody, right? Mental illness touches many of us, and when that happens, often in the course of our healing, there is this desire to connect with others who are going through this. There is a desire to give back and try and support others in their journey. So the first thing I would say is really to be cognizant of what the motivation really is. Oftentimes, for a lot of people wanting to get into this space, it is a way of actually continuing to heal oneself, or validate one's struggles, or recognize one's own journey as familiar in other people's stories as well. And while that is very valuable and helpful, but it can also be a little bit tricky. For example, if you are a therapist, let's say, and there are many wounded healers out there who are wanting to sort of save other people, or the savior syndrome, right? So I would just say the first thing really is to be honest with oneself about why we want to do something in this space, and find the ways of self healing and self care, and find one's own wholeness before one looks to engage, particularly in a one to one context where somebody else is putting their life in front of you. And so that would be just sort of a challenge I feel that people often face. And then it's really recognizing. I mean, this is a space that can do with so many voices and narratives. Dr. Nandini Murali and myself are just putting together a book on women's stories of living with mental health conditions in their families and in themselves. And it'll come out next year. But really looking to bring out stories of normal people like all of us, but the normal and beyond normal lives that we have had, and what are the learnings from that. So different people can contribute in different ways, some by sharing their narrative and their stories. I believe that hearing from experts by experience is the biggest game changer in any space, right? And particularly in mental health, so just hearing people's stories of how they navigated their challenges, what is their definition of resilience, what role did vulnerability play, where do they get their courage from, I think is really the most powerful. In addiction programs, you have like Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon for families of alcoholics, where it's only about sharing stories that makes a big difference. So I think any platforms for building awareness by speaking about one's own stories, it's always the case that when you share, others will share too. It's about normalizing and creating the permission to hold space for these narratives. So I think that's one big area that we can all contribute. It involves very little time and effort. It's just about intent. And actually, we are all going through these things, but everybody's waiting for somebody else to start the conversation. So start the conversation and then see what happens is sort of my one nudge to everyone. And then for those who want to do more in this space, every aspect of it, if you want to look at it from a philanthropic lens, if you want to look at it from building system solutions and thinking about what change management looks like, how can you orchestrate ecosystems in the space of mental health, or you can design programs, or you might want to work with not-for-profit organizations across the country. I mean, in the context of the India Mental Health Alliance, we've identified, I think, over 100 organizations across the country who are doing phenomenal work in different parts, in whether it's in rural context or urban context. So there are so many organizations to know of and to work with or support. Writing in this space is very valuable. India has a massive shortfall of mental health professionals at every level, and so not just at the clinical, not just doctors and psychologists, but also mental health social workers and community workers, frontline workers. You might be a school teacher, you might be a corporate CEO. Everybody can contribute to the mental health space. And so it really depends on your appetite, your time and energy. But I think the first thing to think about is the motivation, and to make sure that we are doing something that is safe for us, but also safe for the people we are engaging with. And so we are in a space of having healed enough and having enough distance from our own traumas to be able to then contribute and make a difference to somebody else.
Yeah, oh my God, that is such golden words, to heal first from your own trauma and distance yourself, because that I think is key, before you go out there and work with people. So what's next for you and Amaha?
Um, I mean, I think it's a boring answer. It's just doing more of the same. We've just set off. We're at the beginning of this journey. We've only scratched the surface. Today we have 4,500 new clients every month. As I mentioned, we were a team of 25 just before COVID started, and as I mentioned, now we have over 150 professionals. I think this year we will go to about 300 professionals in house. And the reason we work with people in house is because we are then able to support them in getting better quality outcomes. We're able to support psychiatrists and therapists to work together. They have all their notes and details on the same platform, so they are able to support clients better. We are able to provide sort of round the clock access for somebody who wants to reach our services. So it's really about doing more of that, and to making sure that for any family's needs across any mental health conditions, across the stage of their lifespan, they should be able to get help as quickly as possible, and with the best kind of quality and partnership, and then really handhold them for that entire journey, so that they can go through sort of the initial discovery of the challenge, but also recognizing what is the treatment or the care plan that works best for them, because different things work for different people. And then to help them see how they're doing, provide that positive validation and support at every stage, and then celebrate people in a community of mental health ambassadors and champions. So I think it's just building on this for children first as well as for Amaha, to be able to just reach out to more families and be able to be a partner in their journey of care, and to be able to help support them in achieving whatever is the best outcomes that can be achieved in their unique context.
What are the upcoming projects or initiatives that you can share apart from the things that you've spoken to us about? Is there anything else that you've not said in any other interview but on mine?
Well, just yesterday we put out the announcement of this book, this labor of love effort that Dr. Nandini Murali and myself are putting together, and so very happy to share about that. It's talking to women across the country who have lived through in their families and in their own selves severe mental illness challenges and how they have dealt with it, and bringing out these narratives in podcasts, in various forums, but certainly in a book that we are publishing with Westland, and will be out next year, hopefully. And I hope that this is the beginning of many more narratives coming up. So I would love to welcome conversations with people who want to talk about their mental health or about working in mental health. So it's an open invitation for anyone listening. If you have any interest, I am be very happy to connect and either support you in your journey or welcome you in ours. So I think this book
I'm
project.
for sure signing up, Neha. Absolutely, I am. Finally, how can our listeners support or get involved? Is there a process? Do they send you an email? Do they get in touch with you? If you could just share those details right now.
Yeah, happy to receive emails from anyone who wants to connect, and perhaps a lot of people reach out when they are thinking about starting something in the mental health space, whether it's an advocacy platform or a youth mental health platform, or starting off any kind of organization or caregiver group. So I'm very very happy to connect and see whatever I can do to share and support that. As does Amaha. We work with a lot of organizations who use theater and arts for mental health, and so and anyone interested in exploring that further would be wonderful to hear from. Anyone who wants to work in this space at Amaha or otherwise, I would love to see how we can support their journey. And so my email is just neha@amahahealth.com, and we can perhaps share the social media handles of Amaha for people who want to connect. So looking forward.
Are there any mental health awareness campaigns that listeners can participate in? Anything that's upcoming or ongoing?
Yeah, from time to time we have things on the Amaha website. We will also start on the India Mental Health Alliance website as we look at the knowledge center getting created. We will have an annual convening of mental health organizations as part of the India Mental Health, and look forward to bringing in as many partners as would be interested in having a shared platform and learning from each other. And as such, I mean, this is a mental health awareness month. And this last month has seen several campaigns that are out there. To call out a few, the Bipolar India work that is happening, I think, is phenomenal to follow. The Schizophrenia Awareness Association work led by Amrit Bakshi is great to look at, and the caregiver movement that Nirmala runs with Face Me, and so many others. I mean, there's the Red Door that does phenomenal community-based work, and Aparna and Rishma's work there is truly phenomenal. For arts-based stuff, to look at Maitri's initiative in Bangalore. Happy to share more details if there's a way to share that with readers, and also particularly to share a list of books and podcasts of people with lived experience. So for anyone who's interested in these stories and in the learnings from these stories, we can maybe send out a link with a bunch of names that people can look to.
So they can get in touch with you on your website, or they can drop you an email. If you could just repeat that email once again, Neha, before we end the show.
Neha@amahahealth.com.
This is for our listeners, for any one of you who wants to participate, and I'm sure there would be a lot of people. Thank you so much, Neha. Wish you lots and lots of luck for this absolutely stupendous work that you have signed up for. And women like you are change makers in our country. And it has been such a great way for me to start my day today. And I'm absolutely honored to have you here with me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Neha.
To you, our dearest listeners, you can find us on your favorite streaming services, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, and of course on all other major streaming services. With loads of love, we are The Mohua Show, where we talk ईमानदारी से.